Lower class and social slime, they don't matter. Genocide, sick from water, sick from air. Making money, they don't care. Caesar shit, force of air. Fuck them back, it's only for they bomb. They shoot, they kill, they massacre, rape. They burn the kids. No one makes countries lie to your face, fight and die. Cause God will give. Selling lies and buying time, killing people next in line. Lower class and social side, they don't matter. Genocide, sick from water, sick from air. Making money, they don't care. See their shit, force of air. Fuck them back, that's only fair. They bomb, they shoot, they kill, they massacre, rape. They burn the kids. No one makes countries lie to your face, fight and die. Cause God forgives. Yeah. Coming back around again.
Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Ron Stevens. This is Rock the Boat right here on UCY.TV, my favorite little network on the whole darn internet. Anyways, what is today? The 30th of January, 2018, so this month's about had the biscuit. And the insanity just continues. We've got everybody and their mother being offended, everybody and their mother complaining about being bullied or sexual improprieties or they had a bad day. Everybody's complaining about everybody else. The Conservative Party here in Ontario has all but been decimated, and it is all part of a plan. As far as I see it anyways. Because the platform of the Conservatives is basically the same thing as the platform of the Liberals and the NDP. God forbid the Green Party. And that is implement UN agendas. So there's really no difference, but the public, especially in rural Ontario, don't like the Liberals, don't like what the Liberals are up to. Maybe they think better in rural Ontario in a way because, well, there's more space and the air is probably better than the people crammed in the cities. But as far as I see it, they want to bring in a mass immigration into rural Ontario, migrants. And the Conservative people don't really like that idea much. In fact, they don't like the idea of having our hydro system sold off to the internationalists. They don't like a lot of things they don't understand because, well, very few people look into politics. They just pick a color and run with it. So to me, it looks like this is just a plan to make the Conservative Party look very ugly, that they're abusers and bullies and extremely sexually inappropriate people, and to make them look bad, hoping to gain some ground in rural Ontario. I don't know that's going to happen, but they're going to give it a shot anyways. Now, another thing I'll touch on before I get too far into what I got so you could do these shows 24/7. I mean, this crap's just coming, it just keeps coming. You got the history you got to deal with. You got all the noise that's going on, the chaos that's going on in the present. You got to look to the future. You could do these shows 24/7. I'm not kidding you. You know, we have Monica Schaefer, a lady from Jasper, Alberta, who's sitting in a high security prison in Germany right now because, God forbid, she denies the Holocaust happened. And is the Canadian government stepping forward to help her out? Not a chance. Not a chance. Is the UN stepping up to the plate to help her out? Not a chance. But then if you knew who created the United Nations, you know why the United Nations is not stepping up to the plate. So here we have this lady who has caused no one any harm at any time in her life. I mean, she's a violin teacher, for crying out loud. Born in Canada, of German descent, and now sits in a German high-security prison of which she can only have a visitor, I think, once every 6 months or something. The lady's 63, I believe, like she's going to cause some problems. But this is what propaganda does to people. It messes with their brain because people never check anything out. And it's totally disgusting that the 63-year-old woman, Monica Schaefer, a violin teacher, for crying out loud, unless she's going to poke you in the eye with the bow, I don't know. But she doesn't look big enough to really cause anybody any harm. There she sits. Now, there was a piece in the Communist Broadcasting Corporation news on this. And the thing was basically written by the ADL and Bertha, or whatever you call it. Then CBC posted it, and apparently everybody's apparently happy that this 63-year-old woman is sitting in a high-security jail in Germany. Now, if you look back at the history of the Jews in Canada, they weren't welcome. They were not welcome. You know, I looked at a little piece here from the, if I can dig it out here. This is from the, oh, that ain't it. Where did I get that? Where is that thing? Where did that go? The Canadian Encyclopedia. Where the heck did that thing go? Oh, here it is. Canada and the Holocaust. I think this is the, what's this say? History Canada. I don't know who put this site together. But they give a definition of the Holocaust, Canada and the Holocaust. And the Holocaust is defined as the systematic persecution and murder of 6 million Jews and 5 million non-Jews, including Roma, Sinti, Poles, political opponents. Are you ready for this? LGBT people and Soviet prisoners of war by Nazi Germany from 1933 to 45. Jews were the only group targeted for complete destruction because Nazi racial ideology considered them subhuman. And there's a lot of weird stuff in here. The Holocaust, okay, there it is, same thing. Though Jewish Canadians did not experience a Holocaust directly, the majority experienced anti-Semitism in Canada. Wait a minute. I thought you couldn't be anti-Semitic in Canada. Jewish Canadians were only one generation removed from lands under German occupation from 33 to 45 and maintained close ties to Jewish relatives in those lands. These ties affected the community's response to the Holocaust, including, for instance, the disproportionate representation of Jews in the Canadian Armed Forces. Jewish Canadians were also heavily involved in post-war relief efforts for displaced persons and Holocaust survivors in Europe. So, anti-Semitism in Canada. Prejudice towards people of the Jewish faith, or anti-Semitism, was a socially acceptable part of mainstream Canadian society. It was a form of open and blatant racism that predated Confederation, before the community had a significant presence in what became Canada. Now, if you go back to the founding fathers, not of the Confederation, but your founding fathers, your forefathers who came here to get out from the boot of tyranny, they understood the system. They understood the difference between good and evil, right and wrong. And again, those people that came over were toting the Geneva Bible, which systematically outed the Pope, the Vatican, the Catholic Church, as to being on the wrong side of things. In other words, the evil. And there was three things they basically didn't want in their villages: Catholics, Jews, and lawyers. So it wasn't that they were anti-Semitic so much. I guess you could call it anti-Semitic. But anti-Semitic is people who are against the over-influence of the Jews. It was their influence, their sneakiness, their ability to deceive people. That's what anti-Semitism is. Okay, so, people say, oh, you don't like Jews. No, I don't like what the Jews are up to, nor did our forefathers. So people, they don't understand the true meaning of anti-Semitism. In other words, we can't trust you clowns. And we don't want you influencing us, deceiving us, and enslaving us. That's anti-Semitism. Look it up. So it was a socially acceptable part of mainstream Canadian society because they understood it. It was a form of open and blatant racism. No, it's not. Look up racism. Okay? The misuse of words is over the top. In the years leading to the Second World War, Jews continued to face quotas on enrollment in education institutions, restrictions on participation in various industries, including medicine and law, and were prohibited prohibited access to property and vacation sites. Signs that read "Gentiles only" and "No Jews or dogs allowed" were posted well into the 30s and 40s. A time when discriminatory immigration policies denied sponsorship requests to nearly all Jewish applicants. To an overwhelming extent, Canadians supported government policy that classified Jews as not, they wouldn't assimilate, and potential threats to national health. Jews are especially vulnerable in Quebec. For instance, Roman Catholic priest, can't see his name from where I'm sitting, the father of French-Canadian nationalism, espoused racist and anti-refugee rhetoric from the pulpit on the radio and in such journals as L'Action de Nationale and another one. And Nazi sympathizer Adrian Erkand established the anti-communist and anti-Jewish party National Socialist Christian National Socialist Party. Erkand later led the National Unity Party of Canada, an offshoot of an anti-Semitic fascist groups that were organized in many towns and cities across the country. These included, for instance, a number of swastika clubs organized in Ontario. Now, anti-communist and anti-Jewish, okay, which was the Christian National Socialist Party, anti-communist and anti-Jewish are connected in this. Because who's behind the communist movement? Let you work that one out for yourself. Throughout the Great Depression in Alberta, the governing Social Credit Party disseminated anti-Jewish sentiment similar to Nazi state practice through radio broadcasts and racist literature, such as the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. Now it says here again, a fabricated text first published in Russia in 1905, claiming to outline a plan for Jewish world domination. Well, this whole thing is about Jewish world domination. Now, is the Protocols of the Elders of Zion a fabricated text? I've read parts of it, or I may have read all of it, it's been a while, and it seems pretty on the button. Now, I don't know if it's a fabricated text. I mean, is it a fairy tale? I don't know. Is it real? Seems real to me. But, you know, the Jews have a habit of deception and deceit. So you deal with it and decide whether or not it's real or not. Anyways, on August 16, 1933, a rare incident of actual Nazi-inspired anti-Semitic violence occurred at Toronto's Christie Pitts Park during a baseball game. Fighting exploded after members of a local pro-Nazi youth group unveiled a flag bearing a swastika, provoking an angry response from the opposing Jewish club and fans. Although no fatalities occurred, the riot at Christie Pitts was a warning for most Jewish Canadians. They were made to feel that they were only one step removed from the tyranny many had escaped only one generation earlier, and to which the growing number of their friends and family were once again being exposed to overseas. Threatened by the rise of Nazism, hundreds of thousands of European Jews sought refuge abroad. However, anti-Jewish sentiment was commonly found among senior members of William Lyon Mackenzie King's Liberal government, which informed political decisions regarding the growing refugee crisis. Mackenzie King heeded his blatantly anti-Semitic director of immigration branch of the Department of Mines and Resources, Frederick Charles Blair, on matters of immigration and refugees. At the time, Canadian immigration regulations categorized Jews among the least desirable immigrant groups, regardless of nationality. In addition to a long-standing discriminatory and radically based quota system targeting not only Jews, but also Chinese, Sikhs, and black, additional qualifications such as a required proof of $15,000 in investment capital or agricultural skills further limited eligibility for Jewish immigrant applicants. Two events prefigured Canada's shameful record during the Holocaust, the country's approach to the Evan Conference and its role in MS St. Louis affair. Now, the conference, convened by the United States Franklin D. Communist Roosevelt, July 1938 was a gathering of world leaders to discuss the mounting crisis of German and Austrian Jewish refugees from Nazism. Fearful that Canadian participation might be misrepresented as a willingness to accept Jewish refugees, Mackenzie King opposed attendance. Key factors motivating his opposition included the belief that letting in more Jews might create a new problem here, and the Prime Minister's racist concern that a intermixture of foreign. This is interesting. Okay, this is a Prime Minister, and they call this a racist concern that a intermixture of foreign strains of blood might tarnish Canadian society. Conceding to U.S. and British pressure, King reluctantly agreed to send Canadian representation to the conference, but with reassurance that no country would be forced into action. In the end, the Dominican Republic was the only even country to offer Jews asylum. The St. Louis affair on June the 7th, 1939, 907 Jewish refugees aboard the MS St. Louis were denied entry to Canada. Fleeing Nazi Germany, the passengers were refused entry to Cuba, numerous Latin American countries, and the United States before passing by Canadian waters. So prominent Canadian citizens asked the government to provide sanctuary for the refugees. The matter was disposed of quickly when Frederick Blair, refusing to consider the request on the basis of policy. And this is what Blair said, or this is the policy, I don't know which. Let's see, Blair refusing to consider the request on the basis of policy. Quote, no country, he publicly declared, could open its doors wide enough to take in the hundreds of thousands of Jewish people who want to leave Europe. The line must be drawn somewhere. The St. Louis was forced to return to Europe. Only 5,000 Jewish refugees were permitted to enter Canada from 33 to 47, the poorest record among Western countries. Second World War. Throughout the 30s, Canada's Jews, numbering 170,000, responded to the rise of Nazi Germany with collective vigor. Jewish newspapers published scathing editorials condemning the devastating impact of Nazi race laws on German, Austrian, and Czechoslovakian Jews. Editorial opinion also targeted the Canadian government's lack of action in challenging those oppressive laws. Winnipeg Jews spearheaded boycotts against Germany, while Jews across the country joined anti-Nazi rallies and lobbied Parliament to allow sponsorship of relatives facing persecution under fascist regimes. Women's groups and mutual aid societies pioneered campaigns to deliver money, food, resources to suffering families and friends in Europe. The Jewish Immigrant Aid Society, charged with immigrant resettlement, assisted with sponsorship applications. Canada joined Great Britain's fight against Nazi Germany on September 10, 1939. Canadian Jews, many of whom were children of European immigrant parents with ties to family and friends overseas, raced to sign up for military service. Approximately 17,000 Jews, roughly one-fifth of the country's Jewish population, enlisted in the Canadian Armed Forces, a figure disproportionate to any other minority ethnic group. Of those who served, 421 Canadian Jewish personnel died in service, and 1,971 Jewish personnel would receive military awards. Having absorbed tens of thousands of mostly German and Austrian Jewish refugees since Hitler's 1933 election, Great Britain declared them enemy aliens, along with all persons from Axis countries. Following the outbreak of the Second World War, Britain turned subsequently to Canada and Australia to temporarily accept this group of foreign nationalists for the duration of the war. The Mackenzie King government reluctantly agreed. In the summer of 1940, more than 3,000 refugees, among them 2,300 German and Austrian Jews aged 16 to 60, were transported to Canada and interned in guarded camps in Ontario, Quebec, and New Brunswick. The accidental immigrants, as the Jews in the group came to be known, were initially interned in prisoner of war camps alongside actual POWs. This difficult situation was protested loudly by the internees, the Canadian Jewish Congress, the Canadian National Committee on Refugees and Victims of Persecution, an agency comprised of prominent non-Jewish Canadians. Senior Canadian officials realized that the Jewish internees did not constitute a threat to national security and were not safe living among Nazi prisoners of war. As a result, separate camps were established. Nevertheless, the Jewish internees' legal status remained uncertain after their POW status was lifted and replaced with that of refugees of Nazi oppression. Their legal status in Canada remained ill-defined for years to come. Many of the internees continued with their secular or religious studies in the camps or learned new skills with support of rabbis in Toronto and Montreal. Interned rabbis organized camp-wide services for holy days, observed the Sabbath laws, and Jewish dietary law and custom. The Jewish internees were later given the option of remaining in Canada or returning to England. Walter Cohn, Nobel Prize in Chemistry, Fred Kaufman, a judge in the Quebec Court of Appeal and philosopher, and Emil Falkenstein were among the 972 who remained in Canada after the camps closed in 1943. Reports from the 36th Olympic Games in Berlin, Germany provide many non-Jewish Canadians with their first glimpse of Nazism. Reports of Adolf Hitler and his totalitarian aspirations continued throughout the Second World War when the Canadian government and major media outlets commissioned journalists, photographers, and filmmakers to document military advances. And while major newspapers reported on wartime atrocities in Europe, mention of Jewish victims was minimal. In 1943, the Canadian government launched its official war art program, yada, yada, yada. Okay, across these mediums, reporters and artists struggled to describe what they witnessed, including human remains of concentration and death camp sites. Such unprecedented accounts of mass state-sponsored anti-Jewish violence challenged comprehension. Few Canadians could begin to fathom or believe the extent to which Nazi Germany had systematically decimated European Jewry. Now, see, it says here Canadians, few Canadians could begin to fathom or believe, right? Well, this was the building of the story. Okay? I mean, if you go back and you look at this, Hitler was sending the Jews out with money. Now, he was getting the Jews the hell out of Germany because they were a problem. Canada wasn't letting the Jews in because they were a problem. So they take and they build this story. And they keep repeating this story. That's the whole thing with propaganda. Create a big lie and just keep repeating it till people believe the damn thing. In the final months of the Second World War, 1st Canadian Army forces played prominent roles in the liberation of Nazi transit and concentration camps in the Netherlands, Belgium, and Germany that had been used to transport Jews to death camps in occupied Poland. Military personnel chanced upon Jews who emerged from the hiding places. In December 1944, Toronto-born Jewish chaplain Samuel Cass and his soldiers threw a bittersweet, whatever kind of Jewish party for the few Jewish orphans remaining in Antwerp, Belgium. For Canadian military personnel, the starkest encounter with the Where was I here? Hello?
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 Oh, I was just listening.
Oh. I was just reading.
Yeah, I know. Your analysis
finish.
sometimes sounds like analysis.
Just let me finish this up. I'm almost done.
I am.
Oh, all right. So let me see. Where was I? Several Canadian military units encountered the camp within the first 48 hours of its liberation, assisting in feeding, providing medical attention, and translation services to the skeletal camp survivors, the majority of whom were Jews. Canadian Jewish airmen and soldiers, many of whom spoke Yiddish, played significant roles in providing informal aid to the survivors. Soldiers collected and dispersed food, clothing, and surgical supplies. In total, well over 1,000 Canadians, airmen, paratroopers, soldiers, doctors, nurses, chaplains, dietitians, and food experts, photographers, and war artists encountered Belsen either through formal service or informal visits. Evidence of the gross inhumanity that had earned Belsen the title horror camp was everywhere. Rampant starvation, typhus, tuberculosis among the crematorium and piles of unburied corpses. According to historian Mark Selesnik, the suffering the Canadian military personnel and volunteers witnessed at Belsen became their defining moment of the Second World War. For some, it was an awful reoccurring memory, while others, it altered the course of their lives. And here we have a Star of David. Well, it's a couple more paragraphs here. Despite awareness of the atrocities perpetrated against the Jews in the Holocaust, anti-Jewish attitudes persisted among Canadians well beyond liberation. 1945, discussing how many Jewish refugees should be allowed to enter Canada after the war, an anonymous Canadian government bureaucrat offered the now infamous reply, "None is too many." In 1946, Gallup surveys of Canadian popular attitudes about immigration revealed overwhelmingly anti-Jewish sentiment. Among those polled, 49% opposed Jewish immigration, the least desirable immigrant, second only after Japanese. The shift in popular attitudes and government policy towards Jewish immigration was a principal response to the largest refugee crisis in modern history. Also fit a practical demand for skilled, cheap labor to support Canada's booming post-war economy. The gradual liberalization of policy began with the Ordering Council PC 2071 on the 28th of May 46 and culminated with the amended immigration policy announced in May 47. These measures marked a sea change in Canada's law and popular attitude toward immigrants and refugees. These changes were especially meaningful for Canadian Jews as they were permitted then to sponsor European Jewish refugees through close relatives and labor schemes. Now, we have the same thing today with the Muslim immigration. Same damn game. Same template, okay? They're being sponsored in by families, being sponsored in by the churches, they're being sponsored in by communities, and labor schemes. Between 47 and 55, the Canadian Jewish community sponsored and resettled approximately 36,000 Holocaust survivors, plus their dependents. Survivors of the Holocaust and the descendants have contributed to all aspects of Canadian Jewish and secular society. In spite of these contributions, Canada is the last country in the Western world to erect a national Holocaust memorial monument. On the 20th of January 2011, the Canadian Jewish Congress and Citizenship and Immigration Canada jointly unveiled the Wheel of Conscience, a monument commemorating the MS St. Louis refugees and featuring the passengers' names and the words hatred, xenophobia, racism, and anti-Semitism. A search for a permanent home for the monument is underway. One location being considered is the National Holocaust Monument, which will recognize Holocaust survivors' contributions to Canada. The monument, entitled Landscape of Loss, Memory and Survival, is scheduled to be unveiled in Ottawa on Yom HaNisha Holocaust Memorial Day on April the 24th, 2017. Now, I just wanted to do that because here we have a woman who is of German descent. Her parents were German. They came here. She was angry with her mother because when she was told about the Holocaust in the school, she asked her German mother, well, why didn't you guys do something about this? And the mother said, we didn't know nothing about it. And Schaefer was angry with her folks all her life because they didn't do anything. Later on, when she started doing some investigative work on her own, she realized why they didn't do something, because it didn't happen. Now, all of these skeletal people and all of this kind of stuff, at the end of the war, okay? Now, what the Allies did is they went in and carpet bombed everything, okay? All supply routes were knocked out, okay? Now, typhus and tuberculosis, they were spraying the camp people with whatever it was they were spraying so they wouldn't get typhus. But once all those supply lines were blowing out, the people in the camps got sick. You got no food, you got no medicine. Okay, so they're saying, well, the Nazis did this. Well, no, actually, it was the Allies that did it because they blew out all the supply lines. They carpet bombed the freaking country. But I find it very interesting that Canada was as anti-Semitic as it was up way late into the 50s, and if you say anything anti-Semitism, but what's happened over those years? The very Jews that weren't, that the early government didn't want anywhere near this place, are now all through our governments. They run our media, they run our newspapers, okay, and they're deceivers and tricksters. And so they're running the show now, and now they're the ones that brought up the idea of multiculturalism. They're the ones that push the buttons on LGBTQ and all that kind of stuff because they're anti-Christian, they're anti-God, they're anti-good, and this is why we find ourselves where we are today. I mean, the ADL is involved with the immigration of the Muslims. So the Jews are bringing the Muslims in. The Jews are the ones that, and I'm not talking about the guy at the freaking, at the Taylor Jew. I'm talking about the upper echelon. Okay, and they are working with the globalists because they are the globalists, and they have, this is World War III. But our forefathers understood the reality of what they were facing. That's why they wouldn't let the Jews, the Catholics, and the lawyers in. Just the foxes, the weasels, and the snakes. And the job of the men is to guard the house. And we've let our guard down through deception and propaganda. And now the weasels, the foxes, and the snakes have control of our house. And we got to go get it back. Anyways, Christopher, how you doing?
I'm doing good.
I was actually going to talk about maple syrup today.
Well, you're
I'm serious about
I've explained this before, but my hero in public school was Winston Churchill. Loved his speeches, man. Loved his speeches.
He was a great orator.
Yeah. And then, even into high school, I kind of, you get into your own thing in high school and you don't really pay attention to what's going on and who's controlling you. You just kind of partying and having fun.
Exactly.
Which all kids do. But he was still my hero. He was still my hero. Hitler was an evil man. Winston Churchill was a good man. And it's really sad that it took this long in my life to figure out
that it's upside down.
Yep, exactly.
Completely
now,
upside down.
I talk to people, what I used to argue with, I talk to them about Winston Churchill, and I say, he was part of their program.
Well, see, this is the same thing, okay? This is the Canadian Encyclopedia. There's a donate button here, support the Canadian Encyclopedia. Well, Mel Hurdick was the guy that published the Canadian Encyclopedia. Mel Hurdick was one of my heroes because he was the creator of the Council of Canadians. He was the creator of the National Party. I am a nationalist. Make no mistake about it. If you're not a nationalist, then you're an internationalist. What do you mean? You're a traitor. So Mel Hurdick, the best dressed, the best spoken, the seemingly most intelligent in any debate. But every time, Mel would talk about nationalism, the media, the other incumbents, and the Politico would jump all over him. And I'm thinking, why is everybody so anti-nationalist? And it's almost like Churchill was a great orator. So was Mel. And Mel was doing all these great things and writing and published the Canadian Encyclopedia. And it wasn't until probably, I'm thinking 2010 maybe, somewhere in there, when I was actually speaking, when I started having conversations with Mel out in Vancouver, where he lived. And, but I had been having some misgivings about the Council of Canadians because Maud Barlow had taken it over. So when I call Mel, and Mel's going, oh, yeah, Maud's a great woman. And you go, whoa, Mel, whoa up. Because she was figured prominently, along with David Suzuki, who still has a hard time about the interim, about the camps that he was in when he was a child because he was Japanese. So he's got to hate out. Maud Barlow was tangled up with Morris Strong, and the UN. I'm thinking, what the hell? But those two names were figured prominently in the UNPA, which is the United Nations Parliamentary Assembly, pushing for a world government. Now, when I told Mel that, I was looking into Maud Barlow, who had taken over the Council of Canadians, which Mel had started, I said, she's actually a Trojan horse. And Mel got very, very angry, which I expected. It was kind of a funny conversation because that was my very first conversation with him. And I told him, what I'm about to tell you is probably going to make you very angry. So, you want to rant and rave and scream and bitch, fill your boots. But don't hang up. So when I mentioned that Maud was a Trojan horse, I actually took the phone away from my ear because Mel went off the deep end. I mean, he was screaming, right? And then when he got caught, he going, who the hell is this? So, we got talking, and I said, I'll send you some stuff. And I sent it to him, and I got an email back, and it said, as hard as this was for me to accept, you're absolutely correct. Okay, so Mel's still my hero at this point. So I told my buddy, Doug Shapiro, who is a hell of a researcher, that I've been talking to Mel. Well, he knew Mel did the Canadian Encyclopedia. And he said, geez, if you're talking to Mel, ask him about Westminster Statute. Because Dougie had been really studying that. So, me and Mel was coming down to Toronto to schmooze his newest book, which I think was The Death of Canada. And we'd talked about having lunch together. But when I asked Mel about the Westminster Statute, now remember, Mel published the Canadian Encyclopedia. Mel is a nationalist. Mel ought to know this stuff. And when Mel told me that he'd never heard of the Westminster Statute, I'm thinking, what the hell's going on here? So I got looking around at Mel. And while Maud Barlow and David Suzuki were figured prominently in the UNPA, when I went through of all the names of the people that are involved in the UNPA, guess whose name pops up? Mel Hurdig. And that really irritated me, because here's a man who was pushing nationalism, not because he was a nationalist. He was pushing nationalism so that they could denounce nationalism. And that was the whole point of the story of the Holocaust, was to denounce nationalism from there on in, because the Jewish game is internationalism, the end of the nation state, world control from an unelected body at the UN or some other body they set up. So, you know, every time after the war, with the 6 million Jew Holocaust thing attached to it, every single time someone opens their mouth and says that they're a nationalist, all hell breaks loose. So yeah, the Jews are pretty tricky. Winston Churchill, when that guy really, he was the big hero, right? And once I got older and looked into Winston Churchill, I started looking into this so-called history we were taught and find out it's absolutely wrong. I was really pissed. I mean, when I think of it, I was really pissed. But then the anger is a gift, right? Anger is a gift. Because once you get angry, you're going to go find out the rest of the stories that aren't right. So this idea that this little woman from Jasper, Alberta, who teaches violin, is sitting in a high security, call it a death camp, if you will, in Germany. And our government now, which has been basically usurped, isn't lifting a finger, because the Jews have taken control of this country. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it.
Well, what you have to understand about this woman is she's 68 years old?
63, I think.
60, okay. Well, still, 63. Very sweet. All she does is, you know, she taught violin. Very Gentile woman.
Very, yeah.
You know, and they got her in a maximum security prison where she cannot even gain access to the outside world whatsoever. For what crime? I mean, you're talking with this very, very sweet woman that couldn't harm a fly if she wanted to. She probably wouldn't even want to. But she knows the truth. And that's the only reason she's where she is. And they're holding her. And nobody knows the conditions she's under. Nobody knows. Like, she's held in high maximum security. Is she put in with Bubba? Like, who is she put in with? Like, and what are they doing to her? Nobody knows. And that's a fact. At this point, nobody knows. Very strong woman, I know that, because she's holding true to her convictions.
Well, she is, and the reason she's holding so tight to them is because her whole life, up until, it wasn't, I think, till after her parents passed away, that she actually took a serious look at stuff. And once people realize that they've been lied to, and they actually believe the lie, and once they see the truth, you can't shut those people up anymore, right? You can't shut them up. Because now they know, and they're going to pass that information along to others, right? And so she's very vocal. But again, she's very almost like a fragile woman, eh?
That's what I'm saying. I mean, it's,
but the they don't want the truth out, and like Zundel will attack to keep a lid on the truth, or keep a lid on the lie, rather. and this is what they do to people.
Well,
But
this fragile
it
woman,
won't hold.
this fragile woman, it shows how strong this fragile woman is, because it took her a while to realize the truth herself. And then once she knew it, she's holding true to it. And, Ernst Zundel was a strong man. He took a lot of flack.
Yeah.
But he was a man. He had people around him to protect him as much as until the end. Until ultimately, the government wins. They got bigger flak jackets than you, bigger helmets, bigger guns, but she didn't have nothing like that. She just had the truth. And, I shouldn't say has the truth. And she's sticking to it. They can do whatever they will with her, and she's not backing down.
Well, that's the beauty of it.
Yep. We should all be sending her letters, is what we should be doing.
Well, I think what we should be doing is looking at this lady, and you can look it up. What's her first name? I forgot it. What the hell's her? Schaefer. Oh, my computer is going for a dump here. But what she? Yeah. What she shows here is that this woman who teaches violin, who now knows the truth about this particular subject, will not back down. And what it really shows is you have this. She looks rather fragile. She's a thin woman. That she has more cojones than the men in this country.
Exactly.
And that's sad.
And at this point, the real men in this country can't do anything to defend her unless you go to Germany. And even if she was here, unless we get the balls as men to stand up to this tyranny.
That's exactly what has to happen.
So real men got to start standing up. So
I was looking through this. I was rooting around looking for some stuff earlier, and I looked up prominent Jewish Canadians or something. Now, I had no idea. Like they were hooked to the League of Nations, right, and hooked to this, hooked to that. But the number of politicians in this country that I did not know were Jewish, it freaks me out, right? Like the names. I don't know if I got time to look that up or not. Let's see. You keep talking while I look for this.
Yeah. I'm only here to ask questions, but I could go on about the lack of balls that we have in our country to stand up against the tyranny and the lack of people that are protecting. Oh, you're back?
Yeah.
Well, you told me just to talk, so I was.
But these names, I would have never known these were Jewish people. Jack Austin, I didn't know that was a Jewish name. Former senator, former cabinet minister, Dave Barrett. Now that doesn't to me sound Jewish, but he is. Former premier of British Columbia. Jim Carr, doesn't sound Jewish to me. Minister of Natural Resources. This list goes on and on and on. Sheila Feinstein, okay, that's Jewish. Herb Gray.
And it has to do with gold or point stone or rubies.
You know, Herb
they're
Gray,
Jew.
Herb Gray. That doesn't to me sound like a Jewish name. Former Deputy Prime Minister. Herb Gray's a Jew. Monty Quinter, Ontario MPP. Mel Lastman. Well, I knew Mel was a Jew. But David Lewis, former leader of the NDP. Stephen Lewis, former leader of the Opposition of Ontario, and ambassador to the United Nations, a Jew.
Yeah, well, they have changed their names.
Well, that's what I'm saying. They're deceivers. They're
you don't know
tricky.
who they really are. Yeah.
Right. You know, Joe Oliver, MP, Minister of Finance. Nathan Phillips from Phillips Square in Toronto, first mayor of Toronto. And it goes on. I mean, public servants, we got a whole list of these people. Now, activists, we have, there's Bernie Farber. He's all over the place. He's now the head of, he was the head of the Jewish Congress, and now he's the head of the Mosaic Institute, which everybody should go and take a look at that. Labor leader, Jewish community leader, and social activist. Judy Rebick. She's been around forever. Activist. But there's so many names in here that do not appear to be Jewish. You know, just so many of them. So what's happened, you know,
magicians,
is we have allowed the infiltration of the very people that our forefathers knew what the hell they were up to. And apparently the early politicians even knew what these people were up to, because even in Canada, you know, for the longest time, and in England, a Catholic could not hold public office, right? So it was a matter of keeping the Jews, the lawyers, and the Catholics at bay. And over generations, you know, the weasels, the foxes, and the snakes got into the hen house.
Yeah, exactly as you
we,
said.
who are supposed to guard the house, failed in our duty. And here we now have a 63-year-old woman who's a violin teacher locked up in a maximum security prison in Germany for speaking the truth.
And she's Canadian.
And she was a born Canadian, and the Canadian people are not rioting in the streets. That's a sad statement.
But the Mohammed Juhamed gets $10.5 million for being held in Guantanamo for killing a U.S. soldier.
Right.
But we defended him in the end. Maybe she'll get $10.5 million.
Yeah, and the idea that Islamophobia, and remember, before Islamophobia, there was a term called Judeophobia. So where the hell do you think Islamophobia came from? From the very people that we weren't supposed to let into the country. So we can't speak negatively about the Jews, and we can't speak negatively about the Muslims as they take over our nation. And I hear music, so we're out of here. We're out of time. Thank you, Christopher. Everybody have a great night. We'll see you Thursday night.
Selling lies and buying time, killing people next in line. Lower class and social slime, they don't matter. Genocide, sick from water, sick from air. Making money, they don't care. Caesar shit, force them air. Fuck them back, it's only for they bomb. They shoot, they kill, they massacre, rape. They burn the kids. No one makes gun. Trees, laugh to your face.